Dragon Ball Sparking Zero gave me exactly what I wanted, being a modern giant toy box of Dragon Ball characters to make fight each other endlessly. I thought I could never complain about having 182 characters on the base roster, but after having some time with the game, I realized, you know what, I want more toys, mostly from OG Dragon Ball. So I want to talk about some of the characters I was either expecting to return from games of Budokai Tenkaichi past, or just petty characters I was hoping to see, since Budokai Tenkaichi 3 had Kid Chi-Chi, Nam, and King Vegeta on the roster, so any random Dragon Ball character seems possible with enough creativity. Fair warning, I love silly characters, so expect that on this list. And hey, maybe these fighters can be downloadable content someday, so think of it as my DLC wishlist too. So let's boost the top 10 characters that we need in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Number 10, Vegeta. I think Super got a pretty nice amount of representation on the roster, but something I was hoping for more of were those B-rank members of the Tournament of Power teams, since you usually had enough for 2 or 3 unique special attacks with a lot of those characters, so you could just fill in the holes in the moveset with something like Full Power Energy Wave, as is tradition. The Budokai Tenkaichi games were all about giving attention to the characters at henchman level or below, so why not do the same with the equivalent characters from Super here? You know, characters like the rest of the Trio de Danger, Ganos the Eagle Man, or that Sentai guy whose name I forget. Alas, the best we got from the B Squad were the Universe 2 ladies who weren't Brienne. But if I had to choose one fighter who deserves more recognition from the Super tournaments, it's Vegeta. When we see Universe 6 get representation in games, the top picks are always Hit and Kefla first, and by extension Caulifla and Kale. And if we get more from them, it's then Frost and Cabba. But despite being on the initial Universe 6 team, Vegeta never seems to get consideration. Less weight is put on his significance, likely because he does less in the Tournament of Power than his other teammates, and he only had one major fight in the anime before that against Vegeta, in which he had help by fighting in a dome to enhance his powers. It also didn't help that in the Tournament of Power, they paired him up with the Winnie the Pooh guy from his team, who was known for being a throwaway fight in the initial 5-on-5 tournament. Felt like a wink at the audience like, remember these two goofballs, they're in the side fights. But that Vegeta versus Vegeta fight was one of my favorites in Super. It was so creative how Vegeta displayed his powers, imposed himself as an actual threat with stage assistance against Vegeta, and unique powers are what makes the Budokai Tenkaichi style games so fun to me. He's got Exhaust, that can be a blast one that stuns the opponent. He can eat energy blasts, which can be a mechanic where he absorbs ki like some of the android characters in the game. He's got Magma Spit, that's a beam super right there, and he can even solidify the magma to form a literal beat stick, which could be a rush attack. In addition, he's massive, so if the main reason he was never considered for games like Xenoverse or Fighters was based on size, Sparking Zero is perfect since giant characters are allowed. Finally, his main weakness is being insulted, so I don't know if there's anything you could do with that in-game, but since he teamed up with Botamo to block out the insults in the Tournament of Power, that gives me a concept for an ultimate, where they both team up for a cutscene. In a world with unlimited roster space, Botamo would get a spot too, but I think this would be a nice way to reference him without using a spot on him, while still giving Vegeta some extra flair. Number 9, Mamba, and by extension, Goku Jr. I like how the DBZ movies and TV specials got at least one rep each on the roster, minus Bio Broly, and the Super movies got reps extending to DLC, but I was hoping we could go one step further. Both original Dragon Ball and GT had movies and specials that never got representation in the fighting games, and while the monster from Blood Rubies or Lucifer from Devil's Castle could be good reps for the Dragon Ball movies, original Dragon Ball is missing basically all of its main series characters, we'll discuss that soon on this list, so I'm fine leaving those movies off, but with GT getting pretty strong representation in the game, why not round out the movie/TV special roster with a rep or two from their end of series TV special, A Hero's Legacy. It takes place before the very end of GT, where there's a 100-year time skip. Goku's descendant, Goku Jr. tries making a journey to Mount Paizu to find his ancestor's Dragon Ball, thinking he can make a wish on it to make Grandma Pan recover from her illness. Nice little emotional special. Goku is a wandering spirit thanks to Shenron, or is still alive somehow, they don't really explain it, and gives the grieving Goku Jr. encouragement. I like this special, even though the plot points that Goku Jr. goes Super Saiyan and the bully becomes a friend are spoiled if you watch the last episode of GT beforehand, but if you watch the special first, it spoils that Goku is a guardian angel in the final episode. Either way, I've always wanted to see a rep from this special in a fighting game, since there's one character I like in it with cool powers. Mamba, who I consider to be the main villain, tricks Goku Jr. and his friend into staying the night on their journey, only to try to kill and eat them since she's a witch. Her main power is hair manipulation, which is one of my favorite powers, but is never seen in Dragon Ball, outside of Garlic Jr.'s main henchman in the anime filler. And who do you want more, this witch lady or the henchman who's less cool than the movie henchman? Well, probably neither, but I like Mamba. The hair strangle could be both her grab and a super move, and she can also materialize a scythe, which could be a melee attack, another rush super, or a projectile super move. For her ultimate, she can have a cinematic team-up with her henchmen, Susha, the frog guy who can liquefy himself, and Torga, the chicken man. She's also under a stronger demon, Lord Yao, who could also be in the cutscene to swing his giant sword, or maybe he could be the main rep since he was the strongest villain in the special, but his powers were less interesting. Alternatively, they could go with Goku Jr. as a rep since he was also in the last episode of GT, and he'd probably play like another Kid Goku despite having no known fighting experience. He can go Super Saiyan, he has that one rush he used against Lord Yao, and since he met Goku, maybe the spirit of the Kamehameha entered his veins. There's enough for a moveset. Ideally, both these characters would make the game as good reps for the end of GT, but Mamba's my pick if we only get one. As we'll later discuss in this video, I'm sure GT will get its own DLC pack or multiple DLC packs in the future, so maybe a Hero's Legacy could sneak on in there. Number 8. Android 21. For the video game exclusive Dragon Ball characters, I of course need to go with Android 21. The lore has already integrated her human counterpart in it, so this is a nice way to keep on bridging the gap between the games and reality. Both her Majin and base form were playable in Dragon Ball FighterZ, so coming up with a moveset is easy. Both forms have their laser swords, red energy balls, death beams, and cinematic rushes that would fit wonderfully in Sparking Zero, and she's got some other moves. Add in that her Majin form also has the Candy Beam and a power stealing mechanic that fits with the Majin playstyle, and you have yourself two creative characters. As mentioned, Android 21 has been sneaking her way into the lore recently, since her appearance was based on Dr. Gero's wife, Vomi, who was shown on his family tree in Dragon Ball Superhero. What's y'all's theory on her and Gero? I assume they were both around the same age, and he based Android 21 on her appearance when she was younger, so either she aged like he did and died, or died younger and he's honoring her by basing a robot on her similar to his son in Android 16. I also like the fan theory that Android 13 is Gero's appearance when he was younger, making 13 and 21 the recreation of the power couple about 50 years ago. Anyway, when 21 was put in Xenoverse 2 as DLC, they only had her base form playable, and when she made a cameo in the video game Kakarot, it was once again the non-Majin form, making me think the series is trying to just go with the human-looking form and the Majin-dominated look is being phased out. It still appears from time to time, but if 21 only gets one form in a game, the lab coat look takes priority. Now that Vomi has been established, maybe they just want that to be the main form, and they're afraid the Majin part could be confusing to newcomers who haven't played fighters. The idea was that she had aspects of the Z main villains, Frieza, Cell, and Buu, so it makes sense with an explanation. The Majin form is really appealing to me, so I want it to keep appearing in games, but if Sparking Zero only offers a single roster spot to 21, I'll let the developers decide which form gets in, as long as she still has those fabulous poses when she does her major energy blasts. We need those fabulous poses. Number 7, now hear me out, Launch. I know we have capable fighters not on the roster yet, and power levels affect character strength in the game, and she gets one shot by Kid Goku in the anime. But the few times we've had a game that could theoretically have Lunch, aka Launch in the dub, I've advocated for her. She's one of my favorite characters. I've mentioned it in a lot of videos, I'll show the figurine again, and anytime she appeared in Dragon Ball when I watched it for the first time, I was glued to the screen for whatever dumb gag would be next. I loved it. If you only read the manga, she probably seemed like a one-note gag, just sneezing to change between her personalities and randomly pulling out a gun to punish a character. That's about it. But the anime added in a bunch of scenes that I liked that gave her more to do, like beating up goons that were going to get Goku disqualified from his tournament match, or actually talking with Roshi to have him explain why blue-haired Launch would choose to live with him, which made me like the bond Launch started to form with the Dragon Team, even if she was still a minor character in the long run. Plus, the gags were still funny. She had Looney Tunes gun logic, and many of the sneeze gags were well executed and subverted my expectations later on. So because I liked her so much, I've had a move set ready since like 2008, which I will share now. Her intro will be as Nice Launch entering the arena, and then she'll sneeze to turn into Blonde Launch, which is who she'll be fighting as. She's an artillery gal, so it'll be a zoning-based fighting style. She's got her trusty guns for some rapid-fire action used in many episodes, and when she was being pursued in her debut episode, she had a rocket launcher, which could be her main beam super, like General Blue's gun in Budokai Tenkaichi. Another super move idea could be her bullet spray from when her angry side first met Roshi and crew in the lingerie incident. She also uses grenades in her getaway, which could be her standard ki blast, just chucking grenades in succession. Her throw could be when she escaped a headlock from a Red Ribbon soldier, and she even has some hand-to-hand fighting experience under her belt, against that same Red Ribbon soldier and Panput's manager's goons, so there's a rush super right there. She even hits them with ice cream. And in her motorized unicycle, which could be used to explain how she can fly and quick dash in the air. Just give it some modifications it did not have in the Dragon Ball days. Finally, for her ultimate, it could be a duo attack with Tien, since she's in love with him and they sometimes live together, where it's a cutscene where she sneezes and turns blue, the opponent stops in their tracks due to confusion, Tien jumps in to save her like when he did during the earthquake during the Saiyan Saga filler, I don't know, he can ki or something, and then Launch sneezes to turn blonde again and finishes it with some bullet spray. In the end, do I ever expect this to happen? No, but for a game that has the potential to have every Dragon Ball character ever, I'm gonna shoot my shot, even if it would take 25 DLC packs of characters to come first for her to even have a chance. Number 6, the one-off tournament fighters from original Dragon Ball. This one is a grouped entry since all these characters filled similar roles in the story and are among the weakest fighters in the series, so they have equally as minute of a chance. In Budokai Tenkaichi 3, they let us play as Nam, Goku's opponent in the semi-finals in the first tournament arc of original Dragon Ball, and ever since his inclusion in a game, I've wanted every character that fought enough to make a moveset out of from the original 3 Dragon Ball tournaments. All these fighters like Nam were meant for an entertaining fight that you knew the character from the main cast was gonna win, but as I said, you put Nam in a game, so now I'm gonna dream. I'm going to put the one-off fighters in one of 3 categories: viable based on moves, potentially but nearly impossible to make, and actually impossible to make. For viable, of course you have Nam returning, and just give him the same moveset as Budokai Tenkaichi 3. The cross-arm charge, cinematic supers, he's all set. Add in a costume based on his cameo in GT. Next up is Giran, Goku's quarterfinals opponent from the first tournament arc of Dragon Ball. His main power was merry-go-round gum, which is like Boo's pink goo, so you could make trapping moves and cinematics with that. Ignore how easily opponents could break out of it. He can also naturally fly, has a tail whip, and has friends, the latter of which could make for a cool cinematic ultimate where he calls them all out. Also, his rain outfit could be an alternate costume. Finally, Bacterian, Krillin's quarterfinal opponent in the initial tournament, is a guy who fights with stench and grime. I just think it would be funny. He's got all of his special moves all ready right from the source. Bad Breath could be a smaller blast stun move, Smelly Finger could be a beam super of scent lines, he could have a rush super based on when he jumped up and down on Krillin, and the ultimate is of course his last resort Mucus Ball, functions like a death ball super. For the highly unlikely characters, you have Man-Wolf from the second tournament arc. Completely outmatched, but he took out a knife, so there's something. And King Choppa. He fought Goku in back-to-back preliminaries, and I don't know, I always felt like he had the chops to be in a Budokai Tenkaichi game. He has the vibes, and Toyotoro drew him with Oob, implying that he might be a mentor and could share some moves with Oob. He's got that 8 arms technique. Tien does it better, but hey, it's something. And for the characters that are impossible, Ranfan from the first tournament, whose main technique was stripping, but she also had this heat punch, which was actually really cool conceptually. And Panput from the second tournament, who does absolutely nothing outside of get knocked out immediately and enables a cool filler scene with launch. Though at the end of the day, I feel all these characters are impossible, since if they're going to add random tournament fighters as later DLC, it's going to be from the Tournament of Power. But as with the launch segment, I've been sitting on these ideas for over a decade and a half, so it was now or never for pitching them. Number 5. Tao Pai Pai. These games were perfect to have Tao in them. He was the first Dragon Ball villain that was stronger than Goku, and he has the potential to hold his own against the extended cast. Yes, I know what happened to him against Tien, but I feel they could fudge the power level numbers a bit with his cyborg form, and just say that he got red ribbon upgrades after the Tien fight to explain how he could last some hits against any of the Z villains. Seeing him in Dragon Ball for the first time was my first "oh my god, he's so cool" moment. Past games have had both pre and post explosion Tao, but if they want to save roster room, they can just have Cyborg Tao and give him aspects of all his fights. Obviously, his Dodon Ray and rush with some of his attacks that he used against Goku should make a return, but for his cyborg form, the slash he used to scar Tien should end his rush, which was missing from his Budokai Tenkaichi Blade Rush. Also, his non-cyborg ultimate used to be a fake surrender Ender Grenade, which was his last-ditch effort in the source material, but I always felt like he should have an actual attack for his ultimate. Just put the grenade in one of his rushes or smaller blasts. Though if only a cyborg form makes the game, then his ultimate is already settled. It's the Super Dodon Ray. Though Budokai Tenkaichi just had it as a big beam, I think they could enhance it by having it do the lock-on and targeting effect it had in the anime to make it fancier. Once again, don't talk about what Tien did to it. Then there are other odds and ends for him. What about a projectile reflect based on the scene where he blocked a bullet with his sandal, or when he heated a bath with his key to boil an egg, just make it an explosive wave or something. Tao's got such a cool arsenal I don't want to see wasted. Number 4. General Rildo. I love those elite henchman characters. You know, your Zarbon, Deborah, the guys that got stuff done or were strong enough to hold their own despite being lined up to eventually be knocked down. Rildo filled that role in Dragon Ball GT for Dr. Mew, the creator of Baby, and I liked the time we spent with him. He gave Goku a good run for his money, had multiple forms, and had a variety of attacks that would mix things up for a fighting game. He had Metal Breath, which could encase you in metal, being for a good freeze you in place move in a video game, Needle Bullets, a giant ass drill, and he's got a Rocket Punch. We all know how good those work in video games. The ultimate has to incorporate his metal planet in some way. He was able to control all the metal on the planet to create a giant tsunami of it and restrain Goku and just make his body appear anywhere on it. Probably gotta cheese that power a bit, but it can work. Also, he had 3 forms: the base form, the one where he combined with the robots, and his naked form. These would make for great transformations, but if they don't want to take up 3 roster spots, any of the forms could work for a single representation, since he had different powers in each of them that could conceivably work with the visuals of his other forms, though I would prefer all of them made it in since he had enough moves to fill up 3 movesets. I just think Rildo finally deserves a chance in a game. He was notable enough in GT and had plenty of moves where I was surprised he's never been featured in any of the fighting games. I would have at least expected Budokai Tenkaichi 3 to have him, so when we eventually get a GT themed DLC pack of Super 17 and Nova Shenron, why don't we round it out with some Rildo? Number 3. Piccolo Daimao. Demon King Piccolo felt like the biggest snub on the roster from original Dragon Ball. He's the villain that changes the vibe of the whole series, and was the recipient of Kid/Teen Goku's strongest and most iconic finishing blow, which is even his ultimate in Sparking Zero, so you would think King Piccolo would at least make the roster so you could recreate that. As consolation, I would have also accepted a separate Piccolo Jr. that was just based on him from the last tournament arc of Dragon Ball. You know, giant form, mouth laser from the ground, rushes based on that fight, but since we have enough Piccolo Juniors in the game, King Piccolo is who I'm gunning for. Honestly, his moveset doesn't have too much to take from. He used a lot of beam and blast attacks, so it may mostly be hand lasers, eye lasers, and finger beams. His rush in Budokai Tenkaichi 3 had him spit out his minion Drum to fight on his behalf, which he could do again in Sparking Zero, but I would like it if he had his own rush. The problem is, after he restores his youth, he rarely ever goes for physical attacks in the anime that aren't a single hit. The closest I could think of is when he's blowing the rocks at Goku to break his limbs when threatening Tien's life, which could be a super move like Frieza's third form rapid fire beam fingers. Actually, his most active rush attack was before he restored his youth in the first fight against Goku, so maybe that would look cool enough with him batting around the opponent based on that fight, or if you really want to pad the roster, have an old and young King Piccolo. Finally, since his main minion Tambourine isn't in the game either, maybe for an ultimate, it could be an attack like the Drum Rush, but instead, Piccolo spits out his 3 main minions, Tambourine, Cymbal, and Drum, and they do a Ginyu Force style team-up attack like in Dragon Ball FighterZ, where they all assault the opponent, and then King Piccolo ends it with a Demon Wave or something like that. Half of King Piccolo's fights involved his minions, which are a part of him and hurt him when they die, so it's a good way to show the interconnection between the characters. And another option is to just bring back Tambourine as his own character in a DLC pack with Piccolo, since he was in Budokai Tenkaichi 3 as a separate character, but I'll take what I can get with early Dragon Ball character demands. Number 2. Anine. I love the vibe of the last filler arc of original Dragon Ball, where Goku and Chi-Chi have to put out the fire at Mount Frypan to get the wedding dress and save Ox King. It was the last time Dragon Ball fully had that journey to the west vibe. I love the lore expansion of Oolong's village, and more importantly, the Guardian of the Furnace that prevents the demons from escaping the underworld and might be the reason Mount Frypan is on fire. That Guardian was Anine, and the whole makeup of this part of Otherworld is fascinating. It was made before the whole afterlife concept was developed in the manga, so it has a very unique Dragon Ball aesthetic. With Anine being a deity, she could conceptually keep up with the later Dragon Ball characters, and she has a full moveset based on her short fight with Goku alone. Her hair feathers can extend and grab, and she can summon a Guanda, which is a type of long blade. She did some slashes and had a rush with it, so there you go, 2 supers right there. She can also grow large and have much more overwhelming versions of these attacks, along with some new ones, like the boot, and to go with how she fans the flames of the furnace, she can create a giant wind blast, which could be her ultimate. Her giant form could be a transformation, but I don't know if she has the legacy to get 2 roster spots, so I could see it just being in a cinematic ultimate like Rebrand's Grow Large attack. Either way, the wind would be involved in her strongest move. Though, Anine's got one bigger hurdle to get over to get into the game. She was a pure filler character, and if a popular filler character like Pikkon was passed over on the initial roster, I'm not holding out much hope for Anine. For Pikkon's exclusion, the modern games really seem to avoid pure filler characters until later editions or DLC, with the exception of movie characters, so Pikkon is the most affected by that. I don't hear many people asking for a Lebu or Arqua or that dinosaur that Gohan befriended. Still, Anine's only appearance was so well done, it's not going to stop me from suggesting her. To conclude this list, I wanted a character missing that represents the present, past, and beyond the past. Number 1, Arale. Arale was the main character of Akira Toriyama's main manga before Dragon Ball Dr. Slump. However, she also appeared in Dragon Ball multiple times, along with the Budokai Tenkaichi series, so she's more than just a guest character. In Dragon Ball, Goku and General Blue accidentally had a chase scene that wandered into the Dr. Slump universe, where Arale ultimately took down General Blue with her robot strength. The movie Mystical Adventure, which was an alternate telling of the second tournament arc and the Red Ribbon arc, had Tao be the one to suffer Aralé's wrath. And after a long hiatus, Arale got an episode in Dragon Ball Super where she got to cause a little chaos and one-shot a bunch of characters because she has gag manga strength. With this extra appearance under her belt, I think it gave her an even fuller moveset just based on her Dragon Ball appearances. Something about her Budokai Tenkaichi moveset felt plain to me. Her two main supers were a charge forward and a giant rock throw, which were pretty generic supers among many characters in that game. They were duded up with her classic speed walk animation and her using super strength, but I feel they could have been crazier. The ultimate was cool though. It was her assault against Blue followed by the Gachans throwing out a beam. And it would be a bit disingenuous to say her Budokai Tenkaichi moveset is fully plain. A lot of her basic melee attacks involve using her feet or headbutting, which is her mantra, and her smaller specials have her power up with some of her catchphrases, like Ncha, which is her greeting, or Waka 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 Waka. These can totally carry over to Sparking Zero. However, I think this moveset could have some of its attacks swapped around. For example, the Gachan beam could be her standard beam super instead of that charge or rock throw, or Arale's Ncha cannon would be the beam, or at the very least, that's how she does her key attacks. For the Rush super, I could see it being a version of the Tenkaichi ultimate, but without the Gachans to power it down a bit, so you still get that classic Dragon Ball reference in there. And for the ultimate, she can split the earth right down the middle in half. Wouldn't that make for a fun cinematic ultimate? You could even change the planet in the cinematic based on the arena you're fighting on. She used this against Vegeta in Super, so there's a power level reference if you really care about that. Another ultimate idea is her 100 times Ncha cannon, which he was about to use in Super before Beerus showed up, but considering the video games have given us the what-if supers of unfinished moves from the anime, like Rakum's Ultra Miracle Fighting Bomber or 16 Self-Destruct, this gives the developers a chance to go crazy with the what-if. Also, Arale loves the whole poo on a stick thing, so I feel you gotta do something with it, whether it's a super or just a weapon she takes out. I don't recall that being in her Tenkaichi appearance. And these attacks are just based on what she did in her Dragon Ball episodes. She also has over 5 years worth of her own manga plus anime to pull moves from. Really, I feel you could have 2 Arale roster spots with how many moves she potentially has. One based on original Dragon Ball, another based on the Super episode. Finally, adding in Arale would be a nice tribute to Akira Toriyama. She's probably his most iconic character not from Dragon Ball, and having her in here could be like when the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fighting game included Ikuro from Bao as a guest character, who is the protagonist of Araki's main manga before JoJo's. Only Arale has even more reason to be on the roster since she played a part in Dragon Ball. So with her super strength and durability that keeps her up with the end of the series power levels, her array of attacks, her fun personality, and her legacy with Toriyama, Arale is my top pick for Sparking Zero. Now, what did you think? Are you on board with any of my suggestions, or am I a bit too ambitious when it comes to picking Dragon Ball characters? And who do you want to make the Sparking Zero roster next, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.